this evening. The English live transcription and translated captions are enabled for this Zoom webinar. And again, you're going to get more information about that. And look at the I'm really grateful to an intern we had, Eva Pujado, for her work in compiling these clips. I do think, and the team and I think, that it is a good representation of who we are and where we focused in the last couple of years. So thanks to Caitlin for showing it. The word of the day is bold. Before us is a budget that takes enormous, bold leaps in making the Commonwealth a better place for all of us, from cradle to career. The motto is peace by the sword. It is the subjugation of Native Americans through violence. That is the peace that our flag and symbol right now and our motto represent. That is not the peace I want embodied in a flag or a seal or a motto of a place I love.
Tonight, we are proposing a permanent disaster relief resiliency fund. And I want to thank Senator Joe Comerford and Rep. Natalie Blais, who championed this idea.
I'm wondering about the cuts that I understand are in the budget to the PCA program. And I have many constituents who access services from PCAs, and they are the better for it. And yet the Chapter 70 formula is not working for the communities I represent. Not now, not once the Student Opportunity Act is fully phased in. It will not work. Amherst, the town of Amherst, over the last 15 years has seen a 1% increase in minimum aid. 15 years, 1%. That is clearly not keeping pace with inflation. Farmers still earn between 94 and 96 cents on every dollar they spend. Think about that just for a moment. Between 94 and 96 cents on every dollar they spend. That is an unworkable economic proposition for our farmers. And yet they keep going. They keep going. How many of us, friends, would keep going if we lost between 4 and 6 cents on every dollar we had to spend to do what we loved? How many of us have that grit and grace? Number 6, the only choice not allowed in this version of the transfer fee is what to do with the money raised. That choice is singular and crystal clear. Communities would be mandated to build the affordable housing that our state desperately needs. Advocating for is for our region to be compensated for the first time in 86 years with a fraction of what we deserve. So I want 2 extra people on the MWRA board. That's the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority board from Western Massachusetts. It's now heavily outside of this area. That's wrong. We steward this water, we maintain it, our town sacrificed for it 86 years ago, we continue to sacrifice. We should have a voice on this watershed. I don't hold to the critique that Western Massachusetts is overall NIMBY and we don't want solar. I do think we want solar and battery storage. We just want to figure out how that we're not, our small communities are not exploited by large corporations. Thanks, Caitlin. And thanks to Eva Pujado for that video. Again, if you only saw part of it because you were coming in, we'll send it to you. And of course, there's much more, but it gives you a sense of where we've focused. So friends, good evening. My name is Jo Comerford. If we haven't met yet, it is my honor to welcome you to the Hampshire Franklin Worcester Senate District's virtual town hall. You are 25 cities and towns, 15 in Franklin County, 5 in Hampshire, 5 in Worcester County. tonight's gathering is one part report back from me and some questions and feedback from you. And it is remarkable that so many registered for tonight's town hall, more than 700. Not everybody will come this evening, but I think it speaks to this moment. There are instructions on how to access the live transcription and translated captions features in the chat. Click the chat icon. That's the little thing that looks like a speech bubble at the bottom of your screen, which will open the chat window. Our Communications and Engagement Director, Caitlin Billings, will review the instructions verbally in a few minutes. But before we move on with our agenda, I also want to make sure that you know that my team is monitoring the chat to catch any questions you have, the feedback you have, and this is everything from district issues to constituent issues to policy and budget issues. We'll try to get to everyone's question live, but they're also going to be answering you as quickly as they can so that you can hear from us right away. And if we don't answer your question, we're going to tell you how to write us directly or call us, and we'll get right on it. For anyone who would rather engage in Spanish, Constituent Services Director Jesse Cooley is going to receive Spanish language questions, and then we will respond in Spanish. And again, the chat will tell you how to get translated captions in real time. So I'm going to ask Jesse just to say hi and translate this so that we can make sure that everybody is able to access this information.
Hola, bienvenidos. Me llamo Jessie. Y si ustedes tienen preguntas en español, por favor avísame en el chat. Y si necesitan direcciones para empezar las capciones, hay información en el chat con todas las indicaciones para esto.
Thanks, Jesse. And again, if you're having any technical issues whatsoever, use the chat and we'll help sort this out. So friends, I want to start by raising up our Communications and Engagement Director, Caitlin Billings. She has been the mastermind behind this evening. I will say that this has not been a quiet week for Caitlin. We passed an economic development bond bill. We hosted a pancreatic cancer briefing in the State House. We held a rally kind of press conference on Northern Tier Rail. And we have tonight, among other things that are happening in Caitlin's realm. So we're really grateful for Caitlin's leadership. I also want to note that you're on for different reasons. And I think that's beautiful. Some of you actually want to hear and hold me accountable for what we said we do. That's good. We're here for it. Some of you have questions about what comes now in terms of the implementation of what we've passed in the legislature. We're here for it. And some of you are responding to the November election. And that is important and real, and we're here for that. And we'll have information about that as well. Also, we have some ideas about what we should be doing. So with that, I'm going to start sharing the slideshow. And we're going to get right into this. And it's really good to see your faces. It truly is. Just give me 1 second. All right, as things are, sometimes things just need a moment. And for some reason, I am not able to see my slides, but give me a second. And I will soon, because that's the universe. Life is complicated, friends. Not too complicated for us, though. Here we go. All right. I think you can see that. All right. So in terms of where we go from here, I think it's 3 parts, right? It's we protect and defend what we have here in the Commonwealth. We continue the momentum, and we've built momentum because of you, and we innovate. I got into state service in the second 2 years of the Trump administration. Why I wanted to run was I believe states can do great things. I really do. And I'm proud of serving at the state level. And we have, and I'll show you what we've done in these last years to make our Commonwealth more equitable, safer, more secure for the greatest possible diversity of people. And we're going to keep going. And tonight we'll talk to you about that a little bit. But first, we're going to hear from Caitlin.
Great. Thank you so much, Joe, and great to be with all 300 of you tonight. Absolutely fabulous. So I'm just going to briefly go over how to enable the live transcript and the captions. So as you can see on the slide, you are able to navigate to your Zoom meeting menu bar, and that is either located at the top of your screen if you're using your browser, or at the bottom of the screen if you are using your caption or the app on your computer or device. And then you will be able to find the Show Captions button. Once you click on that button, and Joe, you can advance to the next slide, please. Thank you. This menu will pop open, and you are able to select your caption language. You are able to do so once you switch that translation toggle over to the right. So the white circle is on the right-hand side of the oval. And next slide, please. And then a white message box will appear in the middle of your screen, and there you can select your desired caption language. And there is quite a long list of languages to select from. And next slide, please. Thank you. And then once you select that language, ensure that that Enable Translation box is checked blue, and then you're able to hit save in that lower right-hand corner of that white message box, and the caption should be able to show up for you. If you would at any point like to turn off the captions, just navigate back to that Zoom menu bar and hit Hide Captions. The captions will continue to be generated. However, they will not appear on your screen in real time. Next slide, please. And if you would like to increase the size of the captions or change the color of that, go back to that Zoom menu bar and click the Show Captions and/or Hide Captions button, and then hit the Caption Settings option. And then this white message box will appear where you can change the font size, the font color, and other settings to your liking. Next slide, please. If you would like to view the full transcript of the meeting, you are able to do so. You are also able to save the full transcript for your own reference at the end of the meeting. Just go back to that same button, Show Captions or Hide Captions, and hit View Full Transcript. And I believe that is it, so I will turn it back to Joe.
Beautiful. Thank you, Caitlin. And again, if you have any problems at all, oh my God, I have the best team. So this is who they are. They're on with us right now. Our Chief of Staff, Jared Friedman, Rachel Klein, who's our Ledge Director. You may have known Rachel as a Policy Director or Constituent Services Director. She stayed in the family, and we're really lucky. Elena Cohen, who, like Jared, has been with us for the last 6 years, District Director. Caitlin Billings, Communication and Engagement, knocking this out of the park. And we have a new member of the team. Many of you know Jessie Cooley. We got lucky. Jessie Cooley is our Constituent Services Director. She comes with state service, and she's already hit the ground running. And of course, we have all-star interns and fellows. We are awash with brilliant, rising young leaders, and we feel like it's our job to give them the best possible launch we can, because we need them, right? I think we all know we need them. Okay, I said before, if you were on, we have 25 cities and towns in our district, and you can see the beautiful, like, eagle shape, now I call it. And people may say, wait a minute, what happened? You'll remember we do a census every 10 years, and our region, especially the Berkshires, lost population, but not only the Berkshires. Franklin County did as well. It's something we're working on. And so we had to all move a little east. So I picked up 4 communities, Winchendon, Ashburnham, Athol, and Petersham, and I lost 3, and that was tough. And that will happen to us as population and demographics shift. But you can see that we cover the entirety of the Connecticut River in Hampshire and Franklin counties down to Northampton. And we almost circle the Quabbin Reservoir. It is a beautiful district made up of the most beautiful people. So tonight we're going to just breeze through some of these overviews so that you understand what we're talking about here. So many of you will know this, some of you will not. That's okay. We are elected. I was just elected in November. Thank you very much, those of you who considered voting for me. We serve for 2 years. We file bills on a 2-year cycle. So the bills we are writing right now and researching and talking about will go in January of 2025. And why I show you this and why we want to talk to you about this evening is that you drive the bills that we file, you drive the bills that we co-sponsor, your voices shape the hearings, you make the difference in committee decisions, and you are part of the power that brings these bills to the floor. I know one thing and one thing only really for sure about government, which is it only works when people make it work. Government can and should work in the best interest of everybody. It can and it should. It doesn't always. And I think you know that. But when government doesn't work, 2 things should happen. One is we should be accountable. My team should be accountable for making it work. And 2, people power needs to kick in, right? So we're going in now to it's unbelievable. It's like almost like a head scratcher, but we're going into our 4th session. So our 7th year. And some of you have noticed and commented that you notice that we're being a little bit more like an organizing force. We have had pretty significant success in the budget and legislation category. We take great pride in our district and constituent services. But this session going forward, I'm inviting you to be organizers with me. This is going to be really important for the things that we want to accomplish. So just like legislation goes over a 2-year cycle, budgets go over a 1-year cycle. So they happen twice in a 2-year term. So we're right where the red star is. The agencies right now are submitting their budgets to the governor. And why is this important? Because if you have interest in what the governor files, and she'll file it in January, let's talk to the agencies. Let's make sure they understand your interest and what's important to you. On December 2nd, we are going to have a consensus revenue hearing. What that means is that the Ways and Means chairs and committees in both the House and the Senate will meet with the Administration and Finance Secretary and a whole bunch of very smart economists and budget wonks. And we're going to talk about how much money we think we'll have for the fiscal year 2026 budget, which is in front of us. And then in January, Governor Healy will file her budget. In March, we're going to have 8 Ways and Means hearings. I am now Assistant Vice Chair, at least I am currently, we'll see what happens next session, of Ways and Means. And for 2 years, I have asked to bring the education and local aid hearings to Western Massachusetts. We had one in UMass and one at GCC. And we were able then to focus on especially rural schools, low and declining enrollment schools, and the real importance of local aid. Then the House does a budget in April, we do a budget in May, and then they have to get smushed together in a conference committee. That's the quick and dirty of it. I'm happy to answer all of your questions. This is what I've been up to in the last 2 years. And when I say we, actually, when I say I really want you to hear we. I do 0 alone. That's just the truth of it. No one passes a bill by themselves. No one does anything by themselves in the legislature. In order to pass a bill, I have to essentially get the okay of 199 of my colleagues. And everything I do for our office, for our district, happens because I have the greatest colleagues in the State House. That's just it, right? And then nothing happens in terms of what we think about and what we prioritize unless you tell us. The stuff we're going to talk about tonight is because you told us that it was important. And it's sometimes I say that a lot, and maybe you're like, oh, come on, Joe, that you got to stop saying this. Except it's hard sometimes for people to believe how powerful you are. In our view about government, you are the most powerful. And we're going to need that power as we go into this next 2 years. It is going to be a hard 2 years, I think. So I'm on a bunch of committees. You can see them on the top left. The councils and the task forces and commissions I'm on are very much driven by the chairpersonship that I have in higher ed and agriculture. And then the caucuses, no one tells me what caucuses to join except for you and our own interest. I have a leadership role in the food system caucus. And Rachel is, really one of the key staff members who drive this. It's a wildly effective caucus. We're struggling right now with the healthy incentives program cuts, and I bet you we're going to have questions about that, and we're going to want to talk about that. But this is how we organize ourselves. And this is how you advocate. So this is a bananas picture. It doesn't nearly convey the kind of incoming we have. Our inboxes are full, our phones ring all the time. That is important. Keep it coming. I am happy to talk to the Senate President or the Chair of Ways and Means or the Governor, Lieutenant Governor, any of the secretaries, and talk about the kind of robust, informed, engaged, and active people I represent. It makes us better when you do that work. Okay, let's go quickly through constituent services. Not every office does it the same way. We take it really seriously. We prioritize it. We put a lot of energy behind it. All of us take constituent services. We're really happy Jesse's here to lead this. We opened and closed 832, to be precise, constituent cases in the last 2 years. That's a pretty high number for a state office. We are really proud of that work, and it represents everything from insurance problems to mass save, God help us, rebates to unemployment claims to mass health, everything. You can imagine we get, if we can't help you, if it's a local issue, or if it's a federal issue, we'll make those connections. Just come to us. That's our job. Our job is to make government accessible and accountable. We also work with municipalities, 25, remember, and on regional issues. That's Elena's realm. And that looks like everything from regional work, like really working it out in Boston on how to fairly fund K-12 education in Western Massachusetts. We're doing a lot of work around the Quabbin and the Connecticut River watershed. We're taking on affordable housing here. And in fact, Rep. Leigh and I just met with Secretary Augustus, HLC Secretary Augustus today, to talk about the forthcoming housing plan, which we were, asking him to work with our housing developers on some questions and concerns. And we focus on regional rail, regional transit authorities, rideshare pilots. Many of you know, and I really shout out to the FRTA that our team has been engaged with FERCOG and the Franklin Regional Transit on a micro transit pilot, for example, in Franklin County. Because while a big bus can't get up to Leiden, and I think there's a bunch of people from Leiden on, a zippy little public Uber can, and we need to do that. We need to make that happen, and kudos to the FRTA for being such a wonderful partner. And kudos to the Fair Share Amendment funding and the Healy administration, because now we have transit fare-free buses. So we're getting there, friends. Keep us hold us accountable. So I'm not going to read all of these things. I'm happy to answer questions on all of these things. And we do municipal work. We're going to tell you in a little bit how many letters Elena's written. We coordinate all the time between what's happening at the local level, state level, and federal level. We bring our colleagues out to meet you. You are the best spokespeople for what we need. So we bring our legislative colleagues and our state colleagues out, and we help bring your voices to Beacon Hill. And then, of course, there's legislation and engagement. So what is legislation? Legislation is simply, and let's just really demystify this. All a bill is an idea to make something better, right? That's what you come to us with. Joe, I don't like this. Joe, this is a real problem for me. or you bring a constituent case, which we know is more than just one person. That's all it is. So we had some significant success this year with our legislation. We're only going to talk about just a few of these things. So first of all, Rep. Lay and I filed in response to the floods of not last summer, but 2 summers ago, 23. We filed the first ever state disaster relief program. We didn't have one. We were one of a very few states. And that passed into law this session. So it was super quick and it was funded in the budget. And we're going to, so not all bills move that quickly, but this one did. And we thank our governor for seeing it as useful and important. And we thank our colleagues for being willing to support this really quick uptick in this program. We also passed something called Gender X. This was not so quick, friends. This was not quick. We worked for a long time to pass Gender X, which just now allows an X marker on all state documents, on birth certificates, on driver's licenses. It's now in statute. And we're really proud of that, especially now. We passed something called Mass Health Estate Recovery Reform. Many of you know about this. This came from a constituent case. We had one of the most egregious mass health recovery programs. And what does that mean? It means if you're on mass health over the age of 55, we were, unlike what the federal government told us to do, we were clawing back the expenses of mass health after 55, not just for long-term care, which is required by federal law, but for preventive services, for home health care, many, many things. And these, and often the clawback happened with the sale of a family home. It was very, very, very injurious, very unfair. And we changed that law. And we had the best advocates coming from this region, including someone named Joe Tringali, who may be known to you. Joe spent his life at Stavros. And he actually emailed us every single week. Hey, what's going on with this bill? And every week we thought to ourselves, we have to have an answer for Joe Tringali. And he didn't live to see this bill pass into law, but his partner did. And this is part of his beautiful legacy. We also passed a bill, thanks to the architects in Western Massachusetts, to reduce what's called embodied carbon. That's the energy created by building materials and the emissions, the carbon emissions created by building materials. It's also the opportunity to sequester the bad stuff in building materials. And we passed that first session, bam. It's in the climate bill now. We have a bill to mandate that the state look at prioritizing solar canopies first, so the built environment before open land. We passed recently a bill that we've tried to pass for some time to transform local public health services. A huge shout out to the public health officials in the district who were among the most fierce advocates. And we passed a pretty significant policy to strengthen the local food system. Again, I'll talk to you about all of this if you want, but not everything that we did came through our legislation. Some of this that we filed actually was implemented by the administration. And this is where I say to you that there are many ways to get a bill done. And every single day, it's like a game of Tetris, although I've never said that out loud. It's like a game of Tetris. Every day, we're seeing things moving and we're like, oh, let's get that. Oh, let's seize this. Oh my goodness, this is the opportunity for that. That's what we do, right? That's the hustle. We don't do it alone. We do it with you. So we protected benefits owed to foster children through the administrative partnership. We massively worked on higher education accessibility. And I'll just say, I was at a Trails for All event where Meg Bandara, who's a wonderful activist, and also Karen Foster from All Out Adventures were there. And they were the drive behind this bill, which will, for the first time, make Massachusetts have to be accountable for making trails accessible. Right now, we can't tell you, even if I wanted to, how many miles of trails are fully accessible. And that's a shame, right? Trails are paid for with public money. They should be available to all. And that's not only people who are in wheelchairs, but that's elders, that's caregivers with strollers, that's everybody. So I'm excited about this. And then we implement policy and we pass bills when we get them into larger bills through amendments. And we do things like in a climate bill, we put in a policy around grid enhancing technology, basically allowing much larger, much more sophisticated cables to be mandated on our grid. So we're not cutting down more trees, taking more open and natural and working lands for the grid, but making the grid we have work better. We are, let's see, I'm just going to see what else I should talk to you about. In the Affordable Homes Act, we passed a rural and small town housing program, and we passed something to ensure regional equity in all of the housing expenditures that happen as a result of this pretty transformative housing bond bill. All right, let's talk about money. Money, it comes in the form of budgets, that's direct expenditures, and then bond bills, that's authorizations to borrow. We've had a number of bond bills. We had a housing bond bill, as I mentioned. We have an economic development bond bill, and they're all important. And we watch out for you in all of those cases. For the local and regional and major statewide funding, we look at statewide grants and core programs that need money. And we also think about earmarks that should come home. And we do both of those things. But let's talk briefly about impact, right? Because people often say, can you quantify what you're doing, Joe? And the answer is I should, right? I work for you. I should tell you how we've done in the last 2 years. So here are some numbers to help you understand what we've been up to in the last 2 years. We filed 71 bills. That's not including what are called home rule petitions. Those are bills coming from municipalities. 19 of our bills, that's almost 30%, were either signed into law or implemented by the administration. It's not bad, actually, as an average. We worked with House partners. Again, House members are key to pass 20 home rule petitions. That's on top of the 30% of other policy bills. We reported out 95 bills from the 2 committees that I chair. We secured more than $2 million in earmarks, that's cash money, and $44 million in bonding earmarks. And that's everything from working with colleagues to secure $30 million for a food science hub at UMass, $4 million for a nursing training center for healthcare trades across the board, and more. We posted 122 blogs, thanks to the team. We sent 22 newsletters, thanks to Caitlin. We tried to reach you 110 times with action alerts because you've signed up for a certain kind of issue or you wrote to us. We brought 43 state officials. That's probably a low number, we think, but that's defensible. Caitlin, I see Elena nodding. But that's what we, there's probably more that we missed, but that just shows you how many delegations we bring out, and then we show them this region, and that's just in the last 2 years. Elena wrote 36 letters and 188 letters of support. And let me just pause here and say, we put every single one of these online, along with our votes, along with all the testimony that we write. And why do we do that? Because you should see what we're writing letters for. You should see how I voted. It all should be available to you. We've done this since the beginning. We invest a lot of work in senatorjoecomerford.org. We're going to send you that URL. It's important, right? Because you might say, Joe, why are you supporting that? I don't support that. And then we can have a conversation and I can learn something from you. This is the constituent services case, 832. Jared put this one on. We think about 37,000 miles on my car. That's probably also, we think, a low number. but this is what it takes, right? This is part of our district. It's huge. And we posted these votes. The last one is really important, friends, because I talked to you earlier about how we think about money coming down. I have to bring money back to the district, but I also fight like hell for school money, for road and bridges money, for equitable approaches to public safety money, on and on and on, right? Unrestricted government aid, pilot money. I want to know how much of that is coming back to Western Massachusetts. I can't tell you that though. So we're going to file a bill. And we're going to say that the administration and the legislature has to get a report every year to see what comes back town by town and Senate district by Senate district, region by region. I want to see it every which way because I want to make sure that we're getting a fair shake of public tax dollars. And I think that's what we owe you. And I think it's what we all owe each other. So with that, I want to talk about moving forward. So what happens next? Again, I talked about earlier, we're going to talk about protecting and defending our region and the Commonwealth. I know that we won't be alone here, right? Our governor's talking about this. We have to continue the momentum we've built, and we've built a lot of momentum, right? Rural, regional equity. These are not, sort of strange phrases that we hear anymore. People are talking about being proactive in including us in the planning because one size fits all policy doesn't fit us. That's just the truth of it. And now I feel like we really are, of course, building on great people who have come before us. We really are getting that consensus in Boston. So we have to continue this and we have to innovate, right? I said earlier that I wanted to get into state service because we were able to, I think of ourselves as like a big, brooding, fierce hen, right? We are like fierce defenders of our communities. We have this line of defense, but we're also great innovators. We also signal to each other. States talk to each other. Hey, what are you doing? You didn't do that yet? We did that. And it goes back and forth like this, and that pushes up to the federal government. And we have to continue that work, especially on climate, but not only climate. So we have to do policy planning. That's what we're doing. We have to change operating processes inside the Senate and the legislature. And maybe some of you are going to want to talk about question 1. We have to follow through on these budgets and bond bills, get the money home, and we have to prepare for the next one, which is what we're doing right now. We have to follow through on ballot questions. I was very, very active on question 2, which passed. I'm proud of it. We had a bill to end high stakes testing, and now we have to make sure that it is implemented, and we have to implement defensive and offensive measures for our communities. So speaking of defense and offense, I won't go through all of these things, but why did I put these together? Because people were saying, Joe, what are we going to do now? Now, I want to stop here and say 30% of our district did not vote for Vice President Harris or Governor Walz. And this is not a campaign event. So I can't go, it's my office event, right? So I can't go into deep politics here. But what I want to say to you is no matter who people voted for, I work for them all, right? So 30%. And not everybody voted for me. And maybe if you're on here now, you didn't vote for me. And I'm so happy you're here. And I've made it a point post-election to go to the places where I got the least votes. And why? Because I want people to understand that it doesn't matter. I'm here for all of it, all the time. And so is my team. So here's some examples of what we've done in the last handful of years, right? To what I believe, I'm proud of these, right? I'm proud of, for example, 2022, we passed legislation to protect providers offering and individuals seeking reproductive health care and gender affirming care, right? We shielded them from the ability of outside states that do not support this from prosecuting them legally, affecting them. We expanding voting access And we still have some work to do to make sure that works for our clerks. They're going to hold us accountable to that, and Elaine is going to help them. We passed legislation to ensure that all Massachusetts residents, regardless of immigration status, have access to driver's licenses, right? We're doing these things. We passed something called tuition equity, which allowed folks who without documentation to go to state schools paying state tuition, not out-of-state tuition. These are our neighbors and our family members who have gone through our schools, and now we want them to go on to our public institutions if they choose to. The governor issued an executive order guaranteeing emergency access to abortion care. She also stockpiled 15,000 doses of mifepristone, right? We are using fair share money to make sure that school breakfast and lunch are free for all public school students, and on and on and on. So maybe you'll have questions about some of these things. This is not an exhaustive list, but you should know that it's a list that we have in our mind. And I know that my colleagues in the legislature are mindful of as we head into the future. This is our contact information. Again, it's coming all home to you, thanks to Caitlin's good work. And with that, I am going to stop my screen. Some of you have been sending questions, and Jared's been compiling them. I want to thank Jesse for putting resources in the chat. So you have resources from Reproductive Equity Now. We're in close touch with them. And we've been a long supporter of them, and they are with us, and we're going to be with them. We have GLAD resources, Stonewall resources in terms of gender affirming care. Jesse and I were on a statewide webinar last week, Jess? This week? Last week? I can't remember. Anyway, we're organizing with them, and of course with Trans Health. And then the ACLU, we've asked the ACLU to come and give a briefing on a Know Your Rights training, and what we can and should do and expect with regard to civil liberties, civil rights, racial justice, human rights. And we're going to host that. So you're going to get some resources, thanks to Jesse, in the chat that you can just take. Caitlin will send them to you, and you can sign up for the ACLU training. And with that, I think we made it through in pretty good time, you guys. There's time for questions. And Jared, why don't you let him rip? I hope people have been sending you lots of questions.
People have been sending lots of questions. And can I just say, great job, Senator. The first question we have here is from Northfield, which is in desperate need of a replacement fire station, and has been following intently progress on a municipal infrastructure, municipal building authority, public safety building authority bill. So can you just talk about that, please?
Absolutely, 100%. Thanks, Northfield. You're not alone, as you likely know. All of our municipalities out here in Western Mass don't have the capital to build the kind of municipal buildings they need. We're different than Eastern Massachusetts that are larger communities and more affluent tax bases. So Representative Natalie Blais and I have filed for numbers of years now a municipal building bill. It would set up an authority like the school building authority and the library building authority, but it would be for things like town halls and fire stations and DPW salt sheds, right? Towns need these things. They don't have the money for them, and that puts them at risk, right? Their finances and also their community's public health. This bill has done well. However, we've not crushed it yet. We've met with the legislature on this, with our leadership. We've met with Lieutenant Governor on this, all of it, and we are going to push it. It's a priority bill of the Mass Municipal Association. In fact, it's the top priority bill. If you want to take an action on this, you could, of course, when we filed the bill in January, you could write testimony on this. You could also encourage the governor to put it in any one of the vehicles that she's moving, because I think this is one of the most crushing municipal issues we have. Okay, next question. I'm going to try to go quickly because I think we have a lot of questions. Jared's signaling me that there are a lot of questions.
Thank you. So the second question is a two-part question. How can we get Healthy Incentives Program, HIP, funding back to its necessary levels? This person saw that some farmers went to lobby on the Hill, but would like to increase the number of people if the legislature and the governor aren't quite yet hearing the message about how critical the HIP program is. And then the second part of the question is about rural school funding. If you can just talk a little bit about your work to possibly widen the number of people who can then engage in funding advocacy for rural schools and K through 12 schools, maybe generally.
Wonderful. All right, let's take HIP first. All right, the Healthy Incentives Program is actually one of the most effective programs that we have in the legislature right now, that it's a priority of the legislature. If you don't know it, it takes folks who are participants in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, and it gives them a state incentive to purchase local produce from our farmers. So it's a win-win. Actually, it's a win-win-win. It's a win for the people who need the food, right? So that's a food equity, food justice win. It's a win for our farmers because it's a source of funding for the excellent produce they have. And it's a win for local economies because it brings people into markets, for example, or into stores. The program was cut or is slated for cuts on December 1st. There is fierce advocacy. I am joining that advocacy with Food System Caucus chairs. What's true is that we need the governor to file a supplemental budget to close the gap. So if your advocacy is right now toward our governor, what's also true is that we need the legislature to signal that we want that supplemental budget. So I'm raising my hand and I'm saying, send us the money. We want to consider that. You could do both of those. You could write to the governor and say, please, please don't let this go without trying to pay the bill. And you could send emails to Senate and House leadership, to folks like me, to your House members on the same thing. What's true is that the fiscal year 25 budget, that's the year we're in right now, did not fund HIP at 100%. That is true. And I feel like that's accountable. I need to be accountable to that. And what's also true is that we pass hundreds of different line items in supplemental budgets to take care of deficiencies, right? We have to balance a budget. We're constitutionally mandated to balance a budget. And so let's take care of this deficiency. That is the truth about it. This program has grown over many years. And it's never had cuts for as long as I've been in the legislature, because it's so valuable. And maybe you could tell I feel pretty moved about this. We have to forestall these cuts. It's a deep priority for me, and I know for many of you. With rural schools, Representative Natalie Blais and I file a rural schools bill, and I see some education, some school committee members, some superintendents on this Zoom. Thank you for your service. Thank you to all the municipal officials who are here, at all the volunteers. You have the hardest job. Our job is nothing compared to local work. That is just the truth. I don't say this to be nice. I'm generally not a nice person. No, I'm kidding. I don't say it to give platitudes or compliments. It is hard to be a local official. And we have to make your jobs easier. One of the ways, and in fact, I think I can say this, the thing I'm focused completely top of the pile, no second, is on school funding. Why? Because right now, our districts are not being equitably funded. There is hundreds of millions of more dollars, thanks to the Fair Share Amendment, coming into local districts. Some of our districts have seen little rises, but many have what's called declining enrollment, or are very, very small. Some are both declining enrollment and very, very small. We don't have an answer for these districts yet. So one thing that I've been pushing for, I have asked the administration publicly in public ways, I have been organizing with colleagues, is that we have to open the foundation budget for a complete review. This is not a radical idea. We haven't done it for 10 years, right? We need to do it. We need to open the foundation budget, but that's not all. Because school funding is two things. It's what districts get and it's what districts give. That's the municipal contribution. And the municipal contribution hasn't been open for 17 or 18 years for review. So my team and I are filing legislation. We've, of course, pushed this way before now, but we're going to get actually much more pointed about it, much more pointed. I'll need you to be with me. We must open these formulas. They are not working for us. We can make them work, and it would be game changers for our communities. So we'll certainly do the policy, and I love the policy, but we have to open these formulas and have an answer for our educators, for our staff, for our administrators, for our families, for our kids. My kids go to Northampton Public School and Smith Vocational. So Northampton High School and Smith Vocational, I want them to be excellent, like you want our schools to be excellent. And they are excellent with excellent educators. The odds are just too darn steep, and it is unfair. And I suggest that we get completely organized on this. There's a group called Project 211. Some of you maybe were on this Zoom that is organizing the regional, the places where there's declining enrollment. And we are going to work together. In fact, we have a meeting next week. So more on this. You'll be hearing from me. Okay, Jared. That was not quick.
So we're receiving numbers of questions about the incoming Trump administration, and I think some of them were sent before the slides with respect to actions the state took, but I'll just read a couple questions and maybe you can respond briefly because we've got a lot of great questions here. So what will Massachusetts do if Trump announces mass deportation of immigrants? And then we've got a number of questions about issues like access to reproductive care and potential cuts to federal funding, including one question specific to access to medication abortion, which I think may have been on your slide, and access to birth control. So maybe you can just try to address all of those.
Super important. So I'm sorry if folks came in. I saw lots of people coming in maybe after the two slides that were titled Line of Defense. So in Massachusetts, we have enshrined the right to reproductive care, and we have protected folks offering gender affirming care, and we've protected and enshrined the right for people seeking that care and the providers, right? Both. Does that mean that we can breathe easy? I think I can't tell you that, right? What I can tell you is that we care about this in Massachusetts. The legislature and this administration has demonstrated a willingness to pass nuanced policy in this Trump era to help our constituents who want to access this care. And we're not exactly sure. I think if you talk to anybody who's leading the Commonwealth right now from the administration, they wouldn't be able to tell you immediately everything we have to do. But what I can tell you is that we have a track record of doing things, and we have a willingness and a tuned-in legislature and an administration who will want to help. And remember, for those of you, maybe Jesse, you can ping this again, for those of you who weren't on, we are in close contact with Reproductive Equity Now. They are fierce, and they have helped push us toward the reproductive bills that we have passed. And again, we've passed a number of them. Everything from stripping out bad language that could be used against us, which we did, to really being proactive in our support of reproductive health care. GLAAD, the Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, Trans Health, many organizations are connecting, and we've been in contact with them. And then the ACLU and others. MIRA is another immigrant rights coalition we're very in touch with. And they're not only in touch with us, they're in touch with many offices that are reaching out. We are going to do a Know Your Rights, a civil liberties, civil rights, human rights, racial justice training for any constituent who wants it, so we can know what we have currently on the books in Massachusetts. And we can talk together about the immigrants in our communities that are not documented and are at risk. And that is true. And some may be on this Zoom right now. So I am including, all of us in this large community. And we are going to need to be a large community at this moment. Oh, actually, I want to say one more thing. I see Andrea Vazian's on the Truth School, which is a gem of an institution in Western Massachusetts. The Truth School is also mobilizing. Many of you may have gone to Truth School classes. I think you probably have. We'll include Truth School, the URL, in our notes that we send out to you. The Truth School is also mobilizing educational opportunities. On top of its already really important free school-like curriculum, right? So I think this is what I'm saying to you is, while we can't say exactly what's coming, we have demonstrated an ability and a willingness to be there, and not just be there for policy. My first advocacy was 3 days in the legislature, was 2019, 3 days after I was sworn in. I was back in Boston because Donald Trump cut the low-income heating assistance program, LIHEAP. That's basically elder heating programs. And the money we needed to replace $40 million in Massachusetts. And I was at a rally on the State House steps. I think people were like, what is this woman doing? And I thought, well, I come from Western Mass, and I got people like Claire Higgins telling me to get my tushy to Boston and fight for this money. So I did just that, right? And I spoke at the rally, and I went and talked to Senate leadership. I'm not the reason that money passed, but I'm just saying to you that we have demonstrated a willingness, both a financial and a policy willingness, to protect and defend and care for our people. I will say this will not come without a cost, right? It just will not. And the budget is going to likely be difficult, and we're going to likely have to make some real choices. Thank goodness we have fair share funding that helps with early childcare, K-12, and higher education, and then it helps with transportation. Right? Thank you to the voters. Thank you to you. We were big supporters in Western Mass. But we're going to have to just really talk to each other, look at each other. I know that all the agencies right now are asking themselves, what do we need? How do we keep doing our work? And you're going to have to talk to me when you're worried, when you have questions. You're going to have to just communicate, and we will communicate back to you every single thing we find out. Next one, Jared.
Thank you. No, that was good because we've received numbers of questions about potential cuts to federal funding for programs in Massachusetts. So go ahead.
I should say, sorry, I forgot. I should say that there is a bill called the Safer Communities Act. Some of you know this. It is coming back in this next session. It hasn't passed. It does a few things, including it prohibits Massachusetts from supporting ICE activity in the Commonwealth. It doesn't let our police be deputized. It doesn't let our public spaces be used. I know that friends are, in different groups are looking at how to strengthen the Safer Communities Act. So just so you know, that it's not just what we did in the past. There's current work going on now to anticipate where we may need strength. And that's coming from the people most affected. Sorry, Jared.
Thank you. So the next question is about the recently signed into law clean energy legislation. So I want to read that question, and then we've received numbers of questions about protecting natural and working lands, including one which just said any possibility of getting more funds back to towns for state-owned land pilot payments. So let me read the clean energy siting question, and then maybe you can talk about natural and working lands as well. So the No Assault and Batteries Citizens Committee in Wendell would like the senator to comment on the permitting and siting solar and energy storage systems as it is affected by this year's legislation. Wendell and other towns in Senator Comerford's district are facing pressure from industry to acquire forest and farmland for industrial facilities, and the Commonwealth is siding with industry. So the question about the permitting, siting and permitting, which was signed into law just recently, and then also natural and working lands and any work you're doing there.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for those questions. So first, I don't know how many of you heard, it was at a Ways and Means hearing that I was talking back to someone who had indicated that in Western Mass we were NIMBYs and therefore not welcoming because just simply we were NIMBYs. And I was refuting this in a Ways and Means hearing, saying, no way are my people NIMBYs. That is not something I believe. Maybe some of us are NIMBYs, but like the general population is not NIMBY when it comes to solar panels. I think actually people want to put a bow on it. I look around my neighborhood and I see solar panels on many roofs, actually more and more every week. So I think we love solar. I think we want the green revolution here. I just don't think we want to be steamrolled by multinational corporations. And I don't think we want to cut trees or take natural or working lands when we don't have to. That's my belief. And I think my job as the person who works, or a person who works for you, is to find the best compromise with the administration. So I think it's one of the most intense issues facing us. The law that is being talked about makes reforms to the siting and permitting process. And for the applications going forward, so any applications that are in now, it does not affect. So that's really something that's really important. We've been, and I want to shout out Jared here, have been deeply engaged in this issue for a long time. Jared carries a lot of our energy and climate policy, and I'm so grateful to him. And we've been trying to make sure that our constituents are heard by the administration, right? So that we grapple with this and you're heard. So we worked with the UMass Energy Extension on what was called the Western Mass Solar Forum. Some of you actually participated in that and as speakers, some of you attended. And we had the authors of the climate bill there to speak. We had the Healy Driscoll EEA, Energy and Environment leadership there. And it was because we wanted you to hear from them and we wanted them to hear from you. We've talked to EEA about wanting EEA to work with towns to develop model solar siting and battery storage bylaws. We've talked to the Attorney General directly. We know that the situation is not working because they're being struck down, and that is not okay, right? So that's one of the things that we've been focused on. As the folks from Wendell know, I engaged pretty deeply with Rep. Saunders, Aaron Saunders, on the New Leaf battery energy storage proposal. We experienced what was really unworkable in Wendell about the current siting and permitting, let's call it regime. New Leaf sought actively with like 700-page brief, sought exemptions from Wendell's bylaws with DPU and the EFSB, that's the Energy Facilities Siting Board. And Wendell did not have the ability to intervene. It was like a David and Goliath moment. We engaged with MEPA, which is the Massachusetts Energy folks, right? They're the I call them the climate watchdogs, seeking an environmental impact report, but the MEPA folks would not engage, right? So I'm going to come back, if I remember, to the point about MEPA, because this has to do with the Natural and Working Lands Bill. So this new law is imperfect. I think you think it's imperfect. I think it's imperfect. It is better than we got it. However, it makes, as I said, reforms to siting and permitting. It requires in statute, because of you, decisions. Every decision has to avoid, minimize, and mitigate. These are the words in the bill, impacts to the environment and ecosystems. That is a very big win. This is a Western Mass win. With regard to permitting, it asks towns to give one local permit I think there are many people here who don't like that. What I want you to know is that it requires and it allows for that one local permit to incorporate conditions from all of the municipalities' governing bodies. We have to watch that as it gets implemented. It provides municipalities with funding to intervene in the DPU and EFSB proceedings. This is a very big deal, right? This is the David and Goliath thing. How could Wendell deal with a 700-page brief with a community without the resources to hire a big fat cat lawyer, right? So we had to level that playing field. I included an amendment which was adopted and it made it into the law to guarantee that municipalities of fewer than 7,500 people would not need to apply to intervene. No, they get to just intervene. They are automatically interveners in the process. Those are our communities that are feeling the pressure. I also had an amendment adopted. And again, these were friendly amendments, right? We haggle in the Senate that gives municipalities more time to do local siting and permitting in case the application changes, which sometimes they do, and 12 months isn't enough time. Could that have been stronger? Yes, we were able to get at least this fail-safe, I call it. The law now looks at incentives to promote solar canopies first. That was the bill I filed. That's in there now. So the state now has to prioritize solar on the built environment and what is called disturbed land. And as I talked about earlier, there was a grid enhancing technology. That's the fat cable idea, right? There's new information out there that we can strengthen our grids through technology. Let's make the state save us money and also make our current grid work better. Our grid was designed for a big coal plant to send us energy one way. Now we need multi-directional, right? We have energy on our homes. We have to send that to the grid. We have to use some of it. So we need a grid that's more modern. Representative Natalie Blais and I passed something called GMAC, a Grid Modernization Advisory Council, thanks to great advocates from here. It was and the Acadia Center, we had a great partner. And that is for the first time requiring utilities to actually say how they're going to modernize their grid and how they're going to pay for it for the first time. And these plans are now being looked at by the energy and environment folks and this wonderful GMAC, this commission. And that was a bill that was passed last session, and that is rocking right now, right? But this is this kind of stuff that we have to do. So I want to move on, but I want to just say before I close because the Wendell question and what happened in Wendell notes, of course, and speaks to the development pressures on forest and farmland. Wendell is not the only community facing this, and I agree that we have to be vigilant. So we are engaging pretty significantly in the forthcoming environmental bond bill. We expect that in the spring of 25. We're frequent flyers right now with EEA and DOER, that's Department of Energy and Environmental Resources, and DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, right? And also our climate chief, Melissa Hoffer. We're really, really connected because we want to make sure that this is a game changer maybe for us, has the resources we need. And we're bringing back a bill that we've talked to them all about that is actually, I want to thank Jared for this, to invest in natural and working lands. So we're updating it. We're talking to administration officials and advocates. We want to codify a no net loss policy for farms and forests. We need to value these lands for the work they're doing. In order to meet the project, oh my God, I almost said Project 2050, but that was wrong. It's Project 2025. But we have climate goals. We have to get to be a net zero Commonwealth by 2050. In order to get there, we have to double our carbon sequestration. Well, you know who has the carbon sequestration and storage? It's us, right? So we have to, but it comes at a price. Our communities are stewarding this land, and it's beautiful, and we're proud of it, but it means they can't develop. this land. And I know many don't want to, but some are worried about how they're going to pay a firefighter or a teacher. So we have to really transition and change the pilot formula. And we need to codify the value of this land. I actually think we're getting somewhere. And we're also really going right at that MIPA question. I have remembered that really we weren't able to get MIPA to engage in Wendell to say, hey, what's the impact of this battery storage going to be on the environment, right? We need to think that our state agencies are going to pay attention for us because they have the expertise. So our bill is going to really lower the threshold for MIPA intervention so that MIPA will be tasked more with being with us during this transition. So I'm going to stop there, but that's some of what we're doing, and it's not the end of what we're doing, and it's imperfect, and I'm going to continue to hear from you and learn from you and get better. Okay,
Thank
Jared,
you.
next.
Okay, great. We're getting a number of questions about higher education, and I want to shout out the UMass students, some of whom it's their first town hall. So thank you so I wanted to make sure to take those questions. So I'm just going to read one of them, and you can speak about this as generally or specifically as you want. Given Mass Educate's success, so this was the program to make community college universally free, as well as strong support for UMass's announcement of free tuition for students with family incomes of lower than $75,000. What are your thoughts on creating a commission to explore expanding this tuition-free model to all public institutions? So you could call it the What's Next Commission. And then I just want to acknowledge that numbers of these questions ask about student representation on any commissions that are going to be looking at this issue now and going forwards.
I appreciate that. I do think we have two commissions moving forward right now. One is looking at capital infrastructure in higher ed. One is looking at student debt and faculty staff salary and a bunch of other things. And they would be stronger if young people were on them. And I promise you that actually I will do better at doing better at getting student representation on things that come, especially things that involve you, but actually everything involves you because you're going to inherit this place. And so we need your voices. And I appreciate that. And I will be held accountable by that. So Mass Educate was a program that was passed in the fiscal year 25 budget. So just in July. And it is free community college. We also did it's actually a $2 billion package. Free community college, pretty significant financial aid for the four-year institutions in Massachusetts. So right now, if you are in a household of $75,000, earning $75,000 or less, you are going to school at a Massachusetts college, tuition fee, book supplies, free. If you go up to $100,000 in the 4 years, that number is halved. So you're paying half of the tuition. Why is this important? Why is free community college important? And why is, shoring up our excellent state universities in the UMass system? For me, I think it's not surprising, right? I value education, right? The early childcare work that we're doing, the K-12 and higher ed. I think it's the great equalizer. I think if we want to care about equity there's many things that we have to be doing. I think public education is one of the great ways we can ensure equity and generational change. Michelle Shute, who's the president of Greenfield Community College, says that education changes family trees, and she talks about how it changed hers. So this is the first year that we've done this, right? Free community college. We're one of the only states in the nation that's trying to also get at the total cost of college, because as you know, right, tuition fees and books and supplies, that's only part of what weighs a student down. We have high food insecurity. We have high incidence of folks living without shelter on our college campuses, right? So that says to us that this is a much bigger issue So what we've done here is we've done free community college. We also put a program called Success, which is aptly named. It's a student support program that was in the community colleges that was exceedingly effective. And we moved that to the four-year institutions as well. And that's a persistence and completion program. So it goes right at the folks who may have the hardest time. Can we fund that better? You betcha. And we have to go back and fund that better because it's not funded well enough to be able to make it easy enough for our faculty and staff at the community colleges and at the state universities to do it, but it's there. We got a foothold in. And then we did some other things like a campus hunger initiative, and we did this 4-year tuition cut. We also have 2 commissions, like I said, the capital one, because we have about a $6 billion deferred maintenance. And for any of you who are budget wonks like me, maybe your head is exploding right now. And these are public buildings. And they need to be green, and they need to be healthy, and they need to be 21st century, because that's where our children are going to, some of our children are going to go to school. And then we have to look at the faculty staff salaries, as I talked about, and we have to look at debt, student debt, which is still crushing. And why is that bad? It's bad for our kids, but it's also bad for our economies. If students graduate with too much debt, they can't be innovators. They can't start new things. They can't take risks. And we need them to do all of those things because they are our future. We also put into place a number of things, policies that went along with this. And I was really privileged to be actually help lead the Senate's work on all of this. So I take responsibility for that. We are fixing transfer between institutions. There are 29 public higher education campuses. We should act like one system. A student enters one place, they should be able to go without problems. We're not doing that so well right now. We can do it better, and our faculty and staff will help us do that, and students will help us by giving us feedback. We're also looking at FAFSA, that's the federal financial aid. We have a MAFSFA here for folks who do not qualify for federal financial aid because of documentation status. We have to make sure that is required for community college because that brings in federal dollars. And you may think to yourself, will those federal dollars still be there? And what's true is that the Department of Education was an act of Congress. So as much as Mr. Trump may think that he can abolish it very quickly, there are many people who would tell him differently, right? And so we're going to have to resist that as well. Oh, Jared, I got a little far afield, but I
just wonder if you can close with the commission, the Chica Commission.
Oh, yeah, I think I did, right? I did say there is a commission. It's the acronym is Chica. Maybe Jared, can you type it into the chat so everybody can see it?
Okay, I'll put a link to it. And if you covered that, I was tracking other questions.
Yeah, no, it's fine. There's 2 commissions going right now. One to deal with our infrastructure in the Commonwealth. And I'm on this one, and it's really exciting. I actually think we're going to do some good work here. It's also like fiscally the right thing to do. We can't allow our buildings to become uninhabitable, right? That's wrong. It costs more money to fix them when they are dilapidated. And then one that's really looking at the future of higher education. One thing I will say is a hopeful thing, which is that our enrollment has been declining. This is a national trend because largely of population. But I will say that our enrollment in the community colleges is trending up in a very robust way. That's good, right? Because that means not only is the money working in, it's harder work for our faculty and staff, and for them, I am deeply grateful, like all educators. And we have to, again, raise the level of their compensation. But also our 4 years and UMass are seeing upticks largely, not every one of them, but largely, right? And again, this is a lift all boats idea, right? We strengthen early child care, we strengthen K-12, and then we make a bright line for students who want that future. We don't tell, and of course we have to do vocational education too, which is also part of the K-12 work, right? We need all doors open for our kids. That's our job. That's the public sector's job. And And again, thanks to Fair Share, we have some ability to do that. All right, Jared, next.
Okay, thank you. I guess there's three more buckets of issues that I would see if you could cover in the final 11 minutes. One is housing. We've gotten a couple questions. What can we do to build more housing? What can we do about rents going up? And there was a big housing bond bill passed, so maybe you can talk about if any of that money is going to come to Western Massachusetts. And then the two other issues are
Just take those two other issues. I'm going
All right.
to do with housing because I'm old and we'll just take one issue at a time. All right. Housing. So we did pass this game-changing housing bond bill, billions of dollars, never done before like this, with tons of policies in it, 13 policies. Was it every policy we wanted? No, right? I have a real estate transfer fee, a local option. I wanted that. I didn't get it. So we're going to come back. But we actually, as I think I mentioned earlier, we just met today with Secretary Augustus because a couple of things are happening. The 5-year housing plan is going to come out. They're going to start talking to us about what funding buckets will be available to our developers. And they're going to release for comment something called a qualified allocation plan, or QAP. And that's like a guiding document that directs everything else. And so Ed Augustus is a very good man. And I wanted to make sure that I represented our developers and our municipalities as ardently and as clearly as I possibly can. Friends, we have to build housing. We have to build it smartly, and we have to build a mixture of affordable and workforce housing. There is no question. That is, we are losing people in Western Massachusetts. We can do this well, but we have to build, and we need a fair shake at that money. Our developers are among the best, I think, in the Commonwealth. They are fabulous. They just have to put together these stacks of funding that are so high. We need help from housing and livable communities to get this done. So I'm heartened by that. Jared was on that meeting with me. The secretary has offered to bring all of the quasi-agencies to Western Massachusetts to meet with our municipalities and help break down the barriers of communication, to meet with our developers. And so, it's not so hard for a municipality to contemplate building housing. And it's not so hard for a developer to meet a municipality. And we talked a lot about some of the barriers for small towns that are different than Eastern Massachusetts. Again, I won't make the decision, and nor should I, because that's an overstep. But I won't make the decision about what a municipality decides to do. But it's my job to make sure that municipalities have every single tool that they need and deserve, and every single dollar that we can squeeze out of Boston. And we also benefited talking about some housing developments that need Boston's closer look, which I won't get into now. But there's some currently in the region that Elena and I are pretty connected to. And so we talked about that too. So it's my job. If you're interested in this, there are many great housing advocates, right? There are many different pockets of housing advocacy all over the region. There's also the Western Mass Network to End Homelessness that's led by Pamela Schwartz. That's like 100 plus folks talking about housing and shelter. These are frontline providers doing excellent work. And there are municipal leaders, state folks. And so that's the whole continuum, right? It's shelter and housing, and it's building affordable housing and a range of housing, right? And again, I won't prescribe that for communities. That would be not my job, but I will make sure communities have what they need. Okay, Jared, next one.
Okay. Senator, we need more rail transportation from Western Mass to Boston.
Did you write that question?
No, I didn't. Can you talk about the building of more rail transportation from Western Mass to Boston?
Thank you for that question, whoever asked it that wasn't Jared. All right. So just the other day in Greenfield, we made a big noise. And that big noise was about launching a letter that was signed by over 100 entities from North Adams, so Berkshire County, all the way to Bristol County. And they were saying one thing. They were saying, bring back Northern Tier Rail, which is along the Route 2 corridor. And the tracks were down, right? The tracks are down. Rail ran there till 1958. And then many of you know the story of the almighty car, and that sucked up a lot of the resources in the United States. It happened in Massachusetts, and one by one, we shut down rail transit and cut off our communities. Our community suffered more because there used to be something called Rabbit Run, which was a railroad that ran between Athol and Springfield multiple times a day, zipping up and down through the Swift River Valley. That is, of course, until the Commonwealth took 86 years ago 4 towns, disincorporated them, dug up their dead, ripped up the tracks, and flooded it so that Boston could have drinking water. You can tell how I feel about this, right? They're not getting one more drop of that water until we get better recompense. Let's just all say that too. We won't have time to talk about that. So what are we doing? So we are advocating for Northern Tier Rail. There's a study happening right now that was actually the first bill I passed. And we are working in a big coalition that includes state legislators and great regional planners and great rail advocates, great municipal officials. And we are building really an unprecedented group of folks to raise our voices to say, this study has to be real. We're going to see it soon. We have to continue to fight for it. But should we just have one east-west rail? No, because we are a giant geographic area, right? Think of us, Worcester West. So there is a Southern Tier project, which is like the Big Mama project. That's been going on for a long time. Many of you know about this. That would connect Pittsfield to Springfield to Worcester. The Northern Tier would connect North Adams to Greenfield to Athol to Gardner to Fitchburg, and into Boston. So the Southern Tier Rail, the Healy administration is doing great work. They are applying for federal funds. Some of those federal funds are coming up to the Northern Tier, by the way. It's like a little quiet, little happy thing that's happening. And they're getting hundreds of millions of dollars in to push forward. So Southern Tier Rail is much more advanced. It is a more ambitious project, actually. It's more high speed. The Northern Tier is passenger rail, a high quality passenger rail. And then we have the north-south, right? We have the Valley Flyer, which we inherited when we got into office. And we had nothing to do with getting it. We could only be grateful to our predecessors, but we had every darn reason to keep it. But now it is. It's permanent service north-south, multiple trains. Now, can it run at better times? Yes. Can it be cheaper? Yes. Can the trips go more smoothly? You betcha. And we are watchdogging that and working with MassDOT and Amtrak officials. So, and then there's a cool little zippy Berkshire Flyer, which is not in our district, friends, but it runs from New York City up into the Berkshires. And that's more sort of seasonal weekend service. And do we have a right to 4 rail services? Yeah, we do. We have a right to be connected north, south, east, west in accessible ways. Our economies, like with housing, our economies and our population depend on it, and the climate depends on it, right? We have to take cars off the road. Put people in buses or microtransit, put them on trains. They have to be green and electrified. This is the vision that we must embrace. Is it going to be harder? Yes, in these next years. But we are not here for the quick fix. We are here for the long haul. And we are going to get this done. So we are in it for the long haul. And that's, I think maybe, I know we're winding down. We have to remember, right? We're going to protect and defend. We're going to keep the momentum, and we're going to continue to innovate. That's the recipe for this time. We cannot throw up our hands at the state and think we'll make no progress. That is not something I think any of us can tolerate or want to tolerate. We have to find a way to do all of it. All right, Jared.
I'm not going to ask you to talk about your work on First Light hydro relicensing in 1 minute. So maybe you could tell people where they can find information, how they can engage,
I can talk about this just
and then you
super
can bring us
briefly.
home.
Super briefly. Thank you for the question on First Light. So First Light is a hydropower facility that sits up in Northfield and Gill. It is regulated at the federal level by an entity called FERC. And every period of time, it's very delayed right now, this relicensing. It goes through a federal relicensing process, but not before Massachusetts does something called a 401 Water Quality Certificate. That's out of the Department of Environmental Protection. And that says to the federal government, hey, this is what we like, this is what we don't like, this is what we don't want. This is what we want. These are the conditions that we suggest. Now, Massachusetts does not have to grant this at all, but if it grants it, it can send conditions. We have been in this work thanks to constituents for years because this has dragged on for years. And it is high stakes for our Connecticut River. So we are endeavoring to take the best people's minds that we hear from and go to monthly calls, which we have with DEP, and then go to events and hold events so that folks can make sure that our constituents have direct access to decision makers at EEA. I think I'm going to stop there. I could go on and on about this. It's pretty high stakes. In the environmental bond bill, we helped organize a letter that was asking the Healy administration for $100 million for a Connecticut River watershed fund in the environmental bond bill. How is this related to First Light? You'll say it's because the health of the Connecticut, which First Light affects, is paramount for many of our people, right? It's paramount for our farmers that draw from the Connecticut. It's paramount for our tourism industry. It's paramount for our communities that need access, right? Natural working lands, they heal us in so many ways. We have to protect them here. So it is something that is quite with us all the time. And I'm grateful to Elena, who leads a lot of the regional work there. I think everybody's grateful for Elena in this and so much else. And we have lots of work to do. This is the clock is ticking on the 401 water quality certificate. And many of you on here have been completely instrumental in how we have aligned ourselves. We have written letters to FERC asking for things like a shorter period, asking for things like indigenous cultural sites to be respected, asking for things like flood mitigation to be part of the licensing, because there's 5 other hydro facilities that are getting licensed at the same time. So maybe First Light can't hold back the Connecticut the next time it pours, but can they do it together? I think so. I mean, what do I know, right? I'm not an expert, but experts have to talk about this. And so we're talking about a lot of different things directly to the federal government. We also, so your next step, all of you, your next step really is going to be to our federal delegation. This is a major baton handoff, depending on what the state does. We don't know what the state is going to do. Really, honestly, we don't know. We're going to try to influence it, and then it will really be in the hands of our excellent federal delegation. Holy Toledo, how many of you stayed? A lot. Wow, you have like real unbelievable staying power. Okay, let me just say one final thing. I love this job. I love doing it. I love the people I represent. I am in awe of you every day. Our democracy is really fragile right now, and we need you to believe in our government and make us work. I need you to make us work. When Western Massachusetts shows up in Boston, which you can do now virtually, You change things. I'm not kidding. We'll tell you when to come in, you know, if you care about education or climate or healthcare. Oh, by the way, we're going to focus on primary care almost exclusively. Primary care. That's it. We have a crisis in Western Massachusetts. So our healthcare is this session, thanks to Rachel, is going to be on primary care. But when we tell you that you can come to Boston, first of all, we'll get you parking if you come, but you can come in virtually. And I see Jared shaking his head. The logistics of thousands of people coming in from Boston will make it work, Jared. But listen to me, I'm getting punchy, but listen, you change things. You make Boston better. The State House is changing. The administration is changing. They see us. Maura wants to govern 351 cities and towns. She wants to govern all of us. So does Kim, right? So does their administration. So does the legislature. And it's because of you and your advocacy. So please be active. You're going to be needed now more than ever. Okay, we love you so much. Take good care, friends.